Hi everyone, and welcome back to episode 2 of Earthling Conversations. I'm Greta von Kirchmann, and this is segment 2 of this episode. Our guest is Joe Giarratano, and he is telling us about an incident in his life when compassion played a big role, and this is when he was an inmate in prison. So we're continuing with that, with him answering that question. So go ahead, Joe.
Well, we were talking, I was in the death house with Marie Deans. And this is the first real encounter with compassion from a stranger, somebody I didn't know, who by all rights, should not be feeling any compassion towards me or anybody in prison. Because as I explained, her mother was murdered by an escape convict. But we're in the death house. I had dropped my appeals. I wanted to be executed. And I couldn't understand how this woman, and to put it in context, you have to remember that this is a system that's geared towards killing me. And they were actively helping me commit suicide, legal suicide in a sense, because when I tried to kill myself, they rushed me to the hospital, sewed me up, did surgery, the whole 9 yards, and brought me back just so they could kill me.
Right. Wow.
But as soon as I said, okay, I dropped my appeals, I'll kill myself this way, they said, okay, we'll do that for you. And so now the Attorney General's office is fighting on my side so they can kill me. It's like trying to keep everybody away from me so nobody could interfere with the process. Marie Deans interfered. But here I am, I'm sitting in the cool-off room of the death house where they bring the body out and place it on the table after they fry it. With this woman explaining to me how, telling me her story, but also telling me that that I wasn't evil, that I was worthy of love, but I had to first accept myself and understand that I was a human being, and that her caring about me was as much about her humanity as it was about recognizing mine.
That's amazing.
And that got my attention because it just made no sense to me that somebody like her could care about anybody like me.
And did you ask her? How are you able to do this? And because over time you developed a long, important relationship with her, so you
Right.
just were able to.
I did ask her.
Okay.
I did ask her, and she explained. And this is where I came to understand. From that point forward, I came to understand that empathy is cultivated in us and developed in us through our own suffering. When we recognize that we suffered, we are empathetic and sympathetic to others who have suffered like us. And everybody suffers in their own way. But Marie explained that she had been sexually abused by her father.
I see.
She had been, she was with an abusive husband at one point. It was an alcoholic.
Mm-hmm.
Her own mother was, in a lot of ways, like mine mentally. She was schizophrenic and could be very cold and very abusive towards her. So she was recognizing me through the eyes of her own suffering and my suffering. So
Okay.
and she made, and that really connected with me when she did that. That gave me the connection that when I looked around at these guys that for all their ignorance and stupidity and bluster and, you know, I recognize myself in them and could relate to their
Fantastic.
suffering.
I see. Mm-hmm.
And when you do that, it changes your perspective.
Okay.
It's really a perspective changer. And
So understand
from that point on,
Okay.
I mean, I had a battle. You know, I was found mentally incompetent to be executed at the time.
Mm-hmm.
The lawyers were able to take over and get an appeal filed without my consent because I wasn't competent to make the decision. They got a court order to get me off of the drugs, clear my system. And as that fog cleared, you know, Marie began counseling me. Lawyers began counseling me and giving me books, and then it was a matter of me finding purpose, finding some purpose in my life as it was right there in the death house.
I see.
And I found, you know, through Marie and through others that cared, the attorneys, the other attorneys down the years, what I found was your purpose is easy to find. It's purpose is looking at the world from the perspective of not what the world can do for me, but what can I do to help.
So you put that into direct action.
Direct action.
And so my next question is, can you please tell us about the Peace Studies and Alternatives to Violence program that you started? If you could describe the program briefly and then also tell us what your inspiration was. If it was Marie Dean specifically, or was there another actual moment where you realized, I can start this program, or I should start this program, or you were inspired to start to make it happen?
Two people were important in this. Marie Dean's number one, and the other person was Coleman McCarthy,
Okay.
who at the time was a syndicated columnist for the Washington Post.
And he created, so tell us, so give us a brief summary of the program, what it is.
Well, how it started. It actually started, this program, the Peace Studies Alternatives to Violence program I started in prison, began in late 1991, early 1992.
And it was...
But my encounter with
Uh-huh.
the whole concept of teaching peace
Okay.
began while I was on death row.
I
Through
see.
Coleman McCarthy. Marie Dean's was, you know, supplying me with books, and I was running into the peacemakers, Gandhi, Martin Luther King Jr., and other Dorothy Day, and all these other great peacemakers throughout history. And in that process, I wound up meeting Coleman McCarthy, who had written some stories about my case. And he was coming in, he had founded in 1985 the Center for Teaching Peace in Washington, D.C. And he had a curriculum that he was teaching in grade school, junior high school, and colleges. A peace teaching course where people would come in and learn about the great peacemakers and study.
The great famous peacemakers of...
And his concept was simple.
Okay.
He said, you know, if we don't teach peace, somebody's going to teach them war. And that's what we did. So when I got off death row, he was bringing students into the prison. And I was interacting with these college students and high school kids, giving seminars, and I began taking his correspondence course and with my reading. And when I got off, he told me one day, when I was in my last execution date, I was in the death house, just a couple of days away from being executed. And Coleman said, you know, if for some reason you don't get executed and you get off death row, you should start teaching peace.
Okay.
And,
wow.
As you know, I wasn't executed. I was let off death row, and I was eventually put into the regular prison population. And when I got there, I was like, okay, I have to do something. You know, I have to find some way to contribute. And he stuck with me, and I wrote Coleman a letter and said, you know, I'm going to start a program here in the prison. And one of my friends in prison, we sat down and we mapped it out. And what we found Prisons, they have programs. They have some educational programs. They have anger management, substance abuse, and stuff like that. But these are programs that are all geared towards behavior modification.
I see.
And most prisoners go into those programs not so much to help themselves, but because it's mandatory. They're told they have to do this program
Okay.
to get transferred to another prison or move to a different level, privilege level, or something like that.
I see.
So it's very manipulative on both parts, and I could see that it wasn't working. Here are these guys that have multiple certificates in substance abuse and anger management, and they're in there doing drugs and anger. So something was lacking, and what I found lacking is that these programs were geared toward, they were imposed on people. But what if I created something that the prisoners themselves could create, design themselves, bring them in and let them create their own program?
I see. Yes.
And let them be responsible for it, let them run it. It was theirs.
And you understood somehow that was the way to...
That was the way to do it.
To do.
So I took Coleman's curriculum, adapted it a little bit, and then sat down and strategized with some pretty tough guys in prison. And we came up with a plan, it was a 3-phase program. The first phase was an introduction to the great peacemakers. Guys would sit down in a small group of usually about 10 people, a couple of times a week, and we had essays and writings from all the great peacemakers, and we get them, read them, discuss them, and these guys had to write their own essays.
Excellent.
And these essays would get sent to Coleman, and Coleman's students would critique, or basically respond to these essays, and what they thought, what the prisoner understood, and whatever thoughts
I see.
It wasn't a grading process.
Okay.
And that became very popular in the prison because it was open debate. We had a formal structure. We had a board of directors. Eventually got a 501c3. The warden, the assistant warden, was on the board of directors. He could also be a member in the class and can contribute to the debates. Not as a warden. He had no authority.
I see.
He was just basically one of us, or a counselor would be in there with us as one of the sponsors.
All right, well, we're going to end the second segment, and please join us for the third segment of this episode.